Good day all, and welcome to the Kenya launch of the Access Insights platform. We still have folks joining, but we're going to get started as we have a lot of really exciting content to share with you today. I'm Christine Ibsinger. I'm the Senior Advisor to Catalyst Off-Grid Advisors, and I'm pleased to be moderating the next hour of presentation and discussion of this critical new tool to accelerate access to energy. We have 9 years remaining until 2030 and the stated global goal of achieving universal energy for all. As you will hear over the next hour, expediting access to data and tools that will support this goal is a key driver behind the Access Insights platform, or as you'll hear it talked about, AIP. Tackling the challenge of using data that's out there more effectively and efficiently, and packaging it in a way that practitioners from government, private sector, civil society can use. That's the underlying challenge. And it's not easy, but one that these partners took on, and I think you will agree after the end of this hour, have succeeded in. I have to say, as I walked through the demonstration with Ian Muir over the course of the last couple of days, I was completely blown away by what this data could tell us, what AIP could bring to life. And if that could tell someone like me, who is far from the realms of a data scientist or a real comfortable with tech, I think you'll find it very useful and beneficial to your goals of achieving universal energy access. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. Please keep yourself muted. We hope to have a very interactive and robust Q&A session after each portion of the demonstration. So please send your questions using the Q&A function in the Zoom panel at the bottom. I'm sure we're all very Zoom savvy, but at the bottom of the screen, you'll have that Q&A function there that you can use. So please send us your questions. We're going to do our best to answer them during this short time together. But if not, we'll be sharing links at the end for you to interact with the team and share additional questions or gather information. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to do a very quick overview of the agenda, which we'll pull up on the screen, and then we'll jump in. I can't see whether the agenda is up there, so I'm going to just quickly go through it so you know what our run of show is for this 1 hour. We're going to have a couple of key opening remarks from our partners who actually were behind both the intellectual and support of this. We're going to hear from Engineer Kiva from Kenya on the importance of this type of tool at the very country-specific planning level. And then we're going to be going into the two-part demonstration with Q&A. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Dan Murphy, Managing Director of Catalyst Off-Grid Advisors, to give us a bit of context as to how the Access Insights platform, or AIP, actually evolved. Dan, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Christine, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We're really pleased to have you with us today for the launch of the Access Insights platform. And before I speak about AIP, I just want to say a quick word about Catalyst. So we are a boutique advisory firm that focuses exclusively on energy access issues in emerging markets. And one of the other differentiating factors about our firm is that the bulk of our team come from the industry itself. So we bring decades of combined experience working on energy access challenges around the world. And it's really that practitioner and sort of insider perspective that led us to AIP and the frustration that we had around the reality, as Christine mentioned, that there is lots of open source data out there that is available today in the public domain that is really very difficult for practitioners to access and to use on a day-to-day basis to make strategic decisions. And so, for that reason, we set out to develop AIP, and it is a tool built by practitioners for practitioners. We want it to be fully open source. It is web-based, as you will see. It's fully interactive. It's free to use. And we really want key stakeholders to leverage this tool to make strategic decisions around their day-to-day activities. Whether you're a last mile enterprise looking to deliver goods or services to remote areas in a given market, or if you're a development partner or an investor looking to finance those activities, or whether you're a policymaker in a national government looking to also catalyze those impacts. So that's our target audience for AIP. A couple of other quick points. So we're launching Kenya today. We will be launching AIP in 3 other markets in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for those launches. Those markets are Sierra Leone, Uganda, and Nigeria. We also firmly believe that AIP should be a must-have for any country around the world that is facing an energy access deficit. We really see this as a crucial business intelligence tool for those markets. And to that end, we are actively looking for partners to help us expand AIP into new geographies. So if any of you that are joining the webinar today may be interested in discussing a potential partnership, we would really welcome that opportunity. So please do reach out. I also want to take a very brief moment to thank some of our key partners. First of all, colleagues from the CDC group and UK Aid, who made grant resources available to us via the CDC Plus Technical Assistance Facility, and to the Access to Energy Institute for grant resources that they also made available. I also want to thank the World Bank colleagues there who worked really closely with us to make AIP a reality, particularly around the multi-tier framework data sets that we've been able to bring to life through the platform, in which you'll see momentarily. The last point that I want to mention is that the site itself will go live after this launch. And so this is your incentive to stick around until the end, and we'll share the web address. And we really look forward to all of you having the opportunity to begin exploring the power of the platform yourselves. So let me stop there and pass back to you, Christine.
Thank you, Dan. And so let's get started. And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing Engineer Kiva, the Secretary of Renewable Energy in the Ministry of Energy in the Government of Kenya. And I'm very pleased that he's able to join us this morning. So Engineer Kiva, over to you.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues. It's a pleasure for us to also be here today when we are launching this AIP. For us in Kenya, it is coming at the right time when we are just launching, also beginning to implement our integrated national energy planning process. And those of you who are familiar with Kenya may know that in 2018, we launched our Kenya National Electrification Strategy, and that was the same year when we also did our revised energy policy. And the next year, 2019, in March, our new Energy Act was then enacted. When we were launching the Kenya National Electrification Strategy, this was complemented by geospatial mapping of our areas in terms of energy provision, all the structures, all the network where it is. And we're looking at the least cost options of being able to electrify the whole country. Looking at all the options available, looking at the grid intensification, green densification, extension of lines, and also decentralized services like mini grids, like solar home system. And out of that work, that's when we formulated and conceptualized the COSAP, Kenya Off-Grid Solar Access Program project, which aims to be able to reach the underserved counties using both public and private arrangements, where the public is leveraging the private sector to be able to enhance electrification. And now in doing this, then we then come 2019, we have the new act, which mandates the Cabinet Secretary for Energy to be able to publish the Integrated National Energy Plan. I'll be calling it INEP for the rest of my speech. And this INEP is looking at not only the power generation, transmission, and distribution planning, but was also looking at electricity access. It's going to look at bioenergy. It's going to look at energy efficiency and also energy resource. Based on our work with the Kenya National Electrification Strategy, this INEP is then going to be premised on a geospatial planning platform. And indeed, we, in the energy sector, we have formed a geospatial planning unit, which is working on the necessary protocols and standardization so that we can then easily be able to update our Kenya National Electrification Strategy. In fact, because of the effects of COVID, where then our momentum was lost and also budgetary constraints, we are preparing to make an update of that KNES, and this time also be able to bring on board our personnel to follow through. Now, in doing this then, for us to make good policy decisions on what to do, where to do, what kind of resources to be able to deploy, because resources are not there in plenty, we will need good data. We need to have data even in our offices to be able to make this decision. And therefore, the AIP's unique approach to aggregating and curating data will complement other geospatial tools and allow us to more efficiently understand our citizens' energy needs and plan appropriate solutions. We are also looking at having a COSAP tool, additional COSAP for the same areas which are underserved, bringing in also other areas which are in other counties and they could be semi-arid. And this tool then will be beneficial to both the national and county government, to the COSAP fund manager and the private sector companies who are receiving COSAP support. The AIP will facilitate data-driven decisions on market opportunities, particularly for last-mile service delivery in the COSAP counties. Therefore, as Kenya, we very much are happy to participate. We welcome the AIP, and this is a tool that we hope is going to be useful, and useful in a way that it is going to meet our country's energy objectives and development objectives. Thank you very much, Christine.
Thank you so much, Engineer Kiva, for those remarks. And we really appreciate your participation here today and your sense of how this tool can be a resource to the Ministry of Energy, specifically with COSAP, but also with the broader Integrated National Energy Plan. So with that, thank you so much. I'm going to turn over to introduce Seema Dhanani, who is the head of the CDC Kenya office. Seema, if I could turn to you, please.
Thank you very much, Christine. Thank you, Engineer Kiva. I'm very grateful at how engaged you and your ministry have been with respect to the platform, and we believe its use will be immensely beneficial in your planning efforts. So as Christine mentioned, my name is Seema Dhanani, and I'm the head of Kenya and East Africa for CDC, the UK's Development Finance Institution, based here in Nairobi. For those who might not be familiar with CDC, we have been an active impact investor across Africa for the last 70 years. We made our first investment in Kenya in 1948 and have supported well-known institutions in the market, such as the KTDA, Housing Finance Corporation, and some of the first renewable projects, such as Olkaria 1. More recently, we've been involved in the likes of Equity Bank, Africa Logistics Properties, and MCOPA. Today, our portfolio in Kenya is just over $320 million. We support 80 companies, and we have assisted in the creation of over 27,000 jobs through direct equity, debt, and intermediated equity. As a regional economic hub, Kenya is a priority market for CDC, and we're proud to be able to contribute towards strengthening the private sector and supporting innovative, pioneering businesses that drive economic development. Beyond our investments, our dedicated technical assistance facility, CDC Plus, is supporting markets and businesses to overcome challenges and uncover opportunities. So it is through CDC Plus that we have been able to support the development of the Africa Insights platform, and we're very proud to see its launch today. Lack of data as lack of data remains a critical challenge facing businesses across Kenya and Africa more widely. Across years of investing in Kenya, we're acutely aware of the transformational effect that access to data can have, and we're eager to see the Insights platform form part of the solution, enabling businesses across the country to gain access and visualize key business data and use it to inform their decisions. Initiatives like this are a key part of CDC's wider ambitions and strategy, and we're committed to supporting markets flourish and spur growth across the region. This achievement would not have been possible without the widespread collaboration and commitment to maximize the potential of businesses and institutions across Kenya. So for this, we're very thankful to the World Bank and the Kenyan Ministry of Energy, among many others. In addition to their support, their enthusiasm and heightened engagement has been an encouraging signal to the value of this tool across industries for both the private and public sector. We're also immensely grateful, of course, to the Catalyst team for their role in hosting this launch and bringing all stakeholders and beneficiaries together. So thank you all very much. To talk a little bit more about why this was so important to us and the opportunity the platform creates for the energy sector, I'd like to introduce CDC's Head of Energy Access and Efficiency, Jeff Manley. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Seema, and hi, everyone. Really excited to be here today for this launch. It's been a lot of hard work that's been put in, and I would also just extend my thanks to all of the different partners. Maybe just to contextualize this for me, over 4 years ago, I started looking at the energy access space, trying to figure out, about solar home systems, about PAYGO models. And I found myself in the London headquarters of a solar home systems company, looking at a computer screen where they were able to pull up a map of Rwanda and show all of their solar home systems spread out on the screen against this map, and look, zoom in to an individual area, look at whether or not that system was being used, whether or not the battery was charged. And it was really, just kind of a light bulb moment, forgive the pun, where I really realized that, the power of data and looking at these types of companies was going to be absolutely crucial. And so that's really the path that we've followed in terms of our investment decision making. We have taken very much a data-driven approach to try to understand the companies, to understand their customers, both from a risk perspective, but also an impact perspective, and really trying to see who are the customers that these companies are reaching, and ensuring that that's aligned with our objectives as well. And then post-investment, we've also been able to support some of the companies that we've invested in to use data, geospatial data, to improve their operations, whether plugging into credit decision-making or launching in a new country to try to optimize some of those business decisions. But I think we've always had a certain frustration that while those were great efforts, we wanted to have a broader impact on the market. And so we wanted to find ways to make these tools more broadly available. And so I think really the AIP is a deliberate effort on our part to try to spread these tools as wide as possible, thinking in particular of, say, smaller last mile distributors that could benefit immensely from these tools, but they may not be readily available because of cost or other reasons. So I think that's really the driver for us, and why we're so excited about launching this in Kenya, and as Dan said, hopefully in other countries very soon. So let me get out of the way so that we can get on to the demo. Like Christine said at the beginning, for me, when I saw it, I was absolutely blown away. So I think it's really exciting, and look forward to sharing that with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And now I'd like to just bring into the conversation for a couple of brief remarks, Donna Ryzenkova, who's the global lead for energy access at the World Bank and has been a partner in our looking at this from the multi-tier framework perspective. Donna, over to you.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you very much for this opportunity. And many thanks to Engineer Kiva, to Seema and Jeff for giving these excellent introductory remarks and showing really why this platform is so exciting. And I fully agree with that. So to get started from the World Bank perspective, I would like to highlight that also this is exactly the type of application of the multi-tier framework service and the collaboration that we had in mind and we were hoping to see when we actually launched the MTF service about 5 years ago. So the MTF service are comprehensive energy access service that were developed by SMAP. And the primary objective of this service was to get a better baseline and tracking of energy access progress that goes beyond the binary indicators of having or not having electricity access or having or not having access to clean cooking. And this approach called the multi-tier framework, or in short, MTF, acknowledges that energy access is a continuum, that the households can progressively improve their energy access by moving from lower to higher access tiers. And so the service allow this classification about in which tier the households are, depending on the key characteristics of their access. And that's availability, reliability, quality, affordability, safety, and legality. And of course, this can be disintegrated by the source of energy, whether it's grid, mini-grid, or off-grid. But when we started this service, and when we were designing the survey instrument, we felt that this is such a great opportunity to also collect a wider set of data about the household energy access or the lack of access, and particularly those that may be of interest to energy access practitioners, whether governments, development partners, or the private sector. So the service include, for example, detailed information on household expenditures, willingness to pay, access to appliances, backup sources, satisfaction with service, socioeconomic indicators about households, their attitudes, and so on. And again, we can look separately at grid and off-grid households. So for now, we have completed 13 surveys, most of them in sub-Saharan Africa, a few in other access deficit countries, and about 6 others are on the way. And always we put up a report and data publicly available. They're available at our site, energydata.info. But the problem is the more comprehensive, the wider the data set, of course, the more difficult it is to use it, because it's very hard just to download a big file with data for everyone and immediately see how this can be relevant to my business or to the project that I'm working on. So so that's really where we saw the huge opportunity with the AIP initiative and the opportunity for collaboration, because it takes all this richness of the data sets, but makes them much more easier for people to use, visualizes them. And so really it brings this whole MTF survey alive. And so we're, like everyone has said, we're very excited to see the AIP platform being launched today, and want to congratulate a lot to the Catalyst team and to the partners for this this job really well done, and thank you for excellent collaboration.
Thank you so much, Donna. We appreciate you being with us. We know your schedule, as others, are packed. So thank you for the time and the remarks. And with that, I am really pleased to turn it over to the real content of this webinar and introduce Ian Muir, who's the principal of Catalyst Off-Grid Advisors, and really if I have to say, a bit of the genius behind what you're about to see. So Ian, I'm going to turn it over to you, and look forward to you sharing, what we've all said is pretty exciting with those on the line with us today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Christine. I'm really excited to walk everyone through this today, and we're going to start off with the geospatial module. So let's dive right in. My thinking is it makes the most sense to give people a quick idea of the types of layers that we've included here. I'll run through a decent number of those, and then we can spend a little bit of time talking about kind of potential case studies. And then I think we're going to open to some Q&A, Christine, and we can get into some of the nitty-gritty details. So starting off with some less interesting things, but important ones. We've, of course, included things like administrative boundaries, allowing people to understand the way the country is broken up. And I'll preface this by saying that much of the data you'll see here is extremely detailed down to a local level. Some of it is only available at a county level, but we very much intend to add additional granularity over time. And this platform is going to be a living platform. And we're adding new layers on essentially a daily basis as we come across them and as partners refer us to them. So one of the new things we've recently added actually is a section on planning and programs. All we have here right now is the COSEP counties, but I'm pulling this up because I really want people to see how this aligns so well with some of the later layers that I'm about to show you. And we're in the process, for example, of adding a number of scenarios from the global electrification platform. And then, of course, as Engineer Kiva mentioned, with the activities that they're about to launch on integrated planning, we'll be keen to host the layers that come out of that work to allow practitioners to be able to quickly pull up the platform and see relatively quickly, oh, what are the priority areas for mini grid development or extension of the grid or solar home systems. And so we're really hoping that the platform can be somewhere that users come to for kind of a first glance of what's happening in this space in a particular market and can take their kind of strategy from there. But let's dig into the more fun stuff. So of course, the Access Insights platform has a reasonable focus on energy, although not exclusively. But I'll show you some of the layers that we've been pulling out. And some of these are pure layers that have been created by others, and some of them are composites that we put together ourselves, which we think add value. So you just saw the COSAP layer. Let me pull up a low quality stopgap total layer. And we have this kind of basic filter functionality set here. So you can kind of see, oh, I want to see what parts of Kenya are using, at least 50% of households are using low quality stopgap total, or 40%. And the overlap of the COSAP territories is very clear. And obviously one of the reasons why those counties were prioritized for that effort. And similarly, you can look at the penetration of solar home systems and solar lanterns globally and see how there's incredible activity in Western Kenya, but still a lot of work to do, because when you switch to a total kerosene layer, you can still see that in large parts of Kenya, over 20% of the population is using kerosene as a primary source of lighting. And so these sorts of layers we think are really valuable and are going to get even more interesting as we introduce additional granularity to them. The same things have been done for cooking fuels. And of course, that's a real area of interest for the energy access space and one of the real challenges that's being faced. Of course, you can very quickly pull up and see where charcoal is most predominantly used, where there's been some headway made on LPG, and of course, where firewood is still dominant, which is a large part of the country. Switching over to grid electricity, let me clear the map here. We're quite excited by the value of all these grid layers that we've been able to build out. So I'm going to switch these on one by one here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that everything is visible. We have grid layers from the entire KPLC network, right the way down to the local level. If you zoom in, say, on Western Kenya, you really get a clear view of how valuable it is to be able to see where the grid has reached and where it hasn't, particularly when coupled with some of the layers that I'm going to show you shortly regarding population, locations, and density. Similarly, I'll leave this on for a moment as I switch over to the mini grid layers. And so some of the mini grid layers we've leveraged here were developed as part of the COSAP planning program. And if I switch on those that are under development, those that are existing, and those that are proposed, you can get a very quick view of how those have been selected relative to the existing location of the grid. And of course, we're very keen to keep these updated going forward as new mini grids are rolled out and provide a real valuable resource in that respect. I'll switch off those layers for the time being. We can switch over to the institutions and services section. Pardon me, yes, which I think is really interesting here. So a lot of the practitioners working in this space are really keen to partner with those offering financial services. And so being able to offer essentially very hyper-localized information on where MFIs and SACCOs are available is key, because if you're a solar home system company looking to expand into an area, there's a good chance you might be interested in partnering with a local SACCO, or at least learning from them in terms of local norms and things like that. And so we allow that possibility through these layers. Similarly, of course, a lot of talk these days about health facilities, and obviously the need to support them, not just in general, but with electricity, particularly for things like vaccination refrigerators. So we're quite pleased to be able to provide disaggregated health information. So zooming out a little bit, I'll start at the highest level, where you can see the provincial hospitals, which are kind of few and far between and probably relatively well served. But as you dig down, you can see there's a pretty incredible number of health centers
as well as dispensaries that could benefit from additional support. And these layers mated with others related to infrastructure and need become a really powerful kind of signal of where work needs to really happen. Similar goes for education facilities. Unfortunately, education facilities are often overlooked when it comes to electrification practices because they're seen as a lower priority perhaps than health centers. But there's a pretty incredible number of primary schools and secondary schools. This data is from the government of Kenya, by the way. And if you zoom in here, just the amount of work that will need to be done to provide reliable electricity to these, particularly as more and more curriculums will start revolving around access to computers and hopefully the internet going forward. So a lot of clear work that needs to be done here, and these layers we think will be valuable in that respect. I'll leave these on just for a moment as we switch over to the population and demographics section. So a lot of people will be used to seeing kind of a standard heat map of population density, which is perfectly valuable for identifying at kind of a low resolution where there's a large percentage of the population residing in areas. But one thing that we were really interested in doing with this platform is bringing in new types of layers that have been developed through a lot of really smart work by various organizations, including Facebook's Data for Good activities. And so I can switch from the population density low resolution heat map to the high resolution heat map, and apologies. And you can see a pretty incredible amount of detail about at a 30-meter resolution of where households are located. And if you then start overlaying this with primary schools and secondary schools and say grid infrastructure, which I can do quite quickly here, you really start to see where there's still opportunities for targeting of whether it's grid extension or solar home systems or mini grids if we move up, particularly into the COSAP territories of Kenya. So really like the idea of integrating more and more of these predictive algorithm-based layers and working with practitioners that are working to develop those. We've also pulled in a pretty wide variety of layers that may not immediately be obvious. It may not immediately be obvious how they're relevant to, say, energy access, but we think are critical given kind of a constantly evolving environment and thinking about development more broadly. So of course we've included things, for example, like age range, like understanding where large percentages of people over the age of 70 are living, and those may be, for example, areas that should be targeted to ensure that the health centers are electrified there to be able to provide vaccines for those that are most likely to be suffering from COVID or most likely to perish from COVID. Fun things like household characteristics. In our sector, a lot of the time people are doing calculations on impact and have this habit of, say, for sub-Saharan Africa, assuming that for every, say, whole solar home system sold, 5 people gain access. But the reality is nowadays we have much better data for that for most markets. And here I can switch on an average household size layer, and you can see how, for example, if you sell a solar home system in COSAP territories, you're not serving 5 people, you're often serving 6 or more. And really kind of helping open people's eyes to the amount of data that's now available to really improve kind of the work we do with KPIs and tracking of impact. Our infrastructure section is pretty short and sweet now because a lot of the energy infrastructure is elsewhere. We build in the road network because we realize that's critical when people are making decisions about access. But one layer that we really think is quite interesting, we haven't seen kind of leveraged elsewhere, is the fact that there are now mobile network coverage maps provided by GSMA, which can help practitioners really understand whether they might face additional challenges when operating in certain areas. So if we come back to Western Kenya and we're thinking about, say, a solar home system company that's looking to expand in an area, they're quite likely going to want their customer to have access to mobile network coverage. And for example, going back to Jeff's example, if the company wants to be able to receive real-time data from that deployed system, they're going to need to have at least 2G coverage. And so fortunately, it's quite good in Western Kenya, but there are still areas, for example, where they would struggle to sell because of altitude and poor distribution of cell phone towers. So while these data layers are not always 100% accurate, I think one thing we're also trying to do here is put some pressure on those that generate these layers to keep them up to date, because they will be used by more people and because people will realize how valuable they can be in planning processes.
Ian, if I could ask, there's just so much here, but if I could ask a question and encourage people to put to use, great. Thank you, Dan Waldron, for starting our question and answer session going. But before we get to these questions, how, there's a lot of focus now on income generation and productive use. How would this tool help stakeholders, practitioners target that area of energy access?
It's a fantastic question, and it's well timed because I'm just moving on to a set of layers where we think that those interested in productive use activities could really benefit from understanding kind of local context. And so we have a whole section here on economic activity. And so, for example, some of these are broader layers that kind of show types of industry participation in an area. So, for example, the percentage of households that are engaged in fishing. But where it gets really interesting is when you actually flip to these detailed layers that show kind of permanent crop growth and livestock and fish. So say you're interested in providing agricultural transformation support, and so that could be in the dairy sector, so preservation of milk. I can quickly flip open here and say, oh, like, look, where's my layer on exotic cattle dairy right there. Boom, you can switch it on. You can see where those activities are occurring and where you're likely going to want to target your initial discovery. Same can occur across kind of all these potential value chains. And we've even come across data layers quite recently that actually locate existing agro-processing facilities, which we think would be really valuable for people that are looking to kind of expand those types of productive use activities and learn from them. So that's very much an important focus and one of our key areas of growth, I think, for the platform going forward as new data layers are made available.
I thought this level was just incredible to be able to go down and see all of this. Could you click on one or two others just to show
Sure.
what we can find?
So like looking at coffee production, one thing when we're thinking about productive use, we're saying it's such a shame how much of the high value add processing occurs outside of the markets in which the agriculture product itself is generated. So in this case, many of these coffee producers are essentially moving raw products to a secondary market where it's being roasted and milled. But we think, with intelligent productive use deployment, so whether that's in mini grids or CNI type solar systems, you could actually move that upstream, and it really helps with these equity challenges that are faced in a lot of these markets and creates local jobs. And it essentially, one of the sadder stories in many of these sub-Saharan African markets is the number of youth that essentially are forced to migrate to urban areas for those job opportunities, right. Because they don't have them locally. And so this is something that we're really interested in helping support going forward.
Excellent. Well, again, please use the Q&A function. I'm sure there's numerous questions about this part of the platform, but could you show us, one of the questions we've received is about the public data. Can you go and show us what the public data sources are that you've integrated? And as I think about this, that's what this is kind of like. It's a gateway to deeper data dives based on what's already in the market. Is that a good way to think about it?
It is, it absolutely is. And the vast majority of the layers that I've shown you so far are available publicly. And we're not just telling you that they're available. We have a button down here at the bottom that says get data. You click on it and it brings you to a Google Drive where we've made available every single data layer that we're legally allowed to for someone to download. And that means they can take that data and they can manipulate it locally on their system if they'd like to. Sometimes the data that's here is actually even more granular than what you're seeing in the map. So you may use the system to kind of home in on an area, and then you say, wait a minute, like actually this data source provides detail right down to, say, the sub-county level, and you can look at that locally and you can see the numbers and run your own calculations. And so we're really trying to wake people up in a way to what's out there and how powerful it can be going forward if used intelligently.
Excellent. Let's see some of the other questions. Dan Waldron's interested in how much more granular we might be able to get with this over time.
So a lot of the layers I've shown you are from the fantastic 2019 Kenyan census. That data is available publicly at the sub-county level. The only reason we haven't shown that is that we've been in negotiations with KNBS, and we're waiting for the official essentially map to be produced for those sub-counties. And that's expected in the near future. And once that's available, we will be able to apply a lot of these areas down to the sub-county level in a way that's reliable.
Excellent.
And then, of course, any layer that's not based on essentially the output of a report or a census can obviously be much more granular. So what you're seeing, obviously, with schools, health facilities, those are hyper localized, to the actual location where they exist, as is the grid network and other things.
A question coming in from our colleague, Will Brent. Hi, Will, from Power for All. How would an evidence-based advocacy organization like Power for All work with this platform to provide analysis to enable it to incorporate it into their own advocacy and support work?
It's a great question. I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. But I mean, in the early days of this, when we were starting to crunch the data internally, I was working with an organization related to some of the campaigning work that was being done in Kenya with regards to the tax and duty exemptions, and wanting to show essentially how valuable the low tax environment had been in terms of being able to roll out solar home systems, and being able to show quite clearly, like, the fact that in parts, there are now parts of Kenya where over 50% of people are getting their primary source of light from solar. Just shows how powerful this is for improving outcomes. And so it obviously really depends on what point you're trying to prove, but we think there's an incredible amount of data already here at your fingertips to help you make that case. And we kind of leave it to you to some extent to manipulate that data and look for those relationships. But I think it's a good question too, because flipping over to the MTF, which we'll be doing shortly, I'll show you just how powerful that can be in terms of helping practitioners really understand the local context, and seeing kind of the relationships between all sorts of factors. And the MTF is an extremely powerful data set. Like Dana mentioned, the issue is it's obviously difficult to manipulate. You need a real data scientist on your team to be able to do that locally. We've built out these tools that allow you to essentially examine the crosstabs in a way that anyone that has access to an internet browser can. And so I think that will be extremely enlightening for a lot of people too.
Excellent. There's some other questions coming in, which we are going to get to, but what I'd like to do is to quickly move to the presentation of the multi-tier framework platform, because I think that is also an incredible visualization. And we'll get to these questions that have been provided to us from Luke, from Susan, and from Dimitrios in the next session. So we won't lose them at all. Over to you, Ian, for the multi-tier framework.
Super. So this is similarly easy to use. We have essentially 4 groupings of chart types, and within each of them, a large number of charts which you can directly interact with. So each of them has filters built in. And I'll go ahead and dive in. Some of these charts you can see quite clearly in the fantastic PDF reports that are produced by the SMAP team after these multi-tier framework surveys are conducted. But what, of course, they can't do in a PDF format is allow a user to interact with those charts. So taking some kind of the very simple, straightforward charts, not only can you see very clearly, okay, this is the electricity access situation in Kenya nationally. You can very quickly see breakdowns at kind of an urban or a rural level. You can very quickly say, oh, well, only show me people actually that are cooking with charcoal, and what does that look like? Or even, what kind of stove are they using, and what does that mean for their electricity access, the correlation between those elements. And so there's essentially thousands of potential permutations possible across these charts. And this one is a pretty straightforward one, but I'm looking forward to showing you some of the ones that are a little bit different, that often don't even make it into the reports, and that say a lot about the status quo in a particular market. And hopefully we'll give practitioners ideas as to how to kind of improve the way in which they target households, and better understand the challenges that those households are facing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to bring you through a handful of these charts, as I did with the geospatial module on those layers, and then we can talk a little bit about other potential uses. So For the cooking fuel ones, this is a pretty grim situation. Of course, very few people cooking with LPG in Kenya, or other modern forms of fuel. And if you switch to the rural view, it's even worse still. When you look at the primary source of household lighting, there's stark differences based on where households are located, which you can change here. There's a really interesting differences when you look at what people are cooking with, because again, essentially the inverse of what we were saying before. So you're saying, oh, people that are cooking with LPG, are almost 90% of them are connected to the electricity grid. People that are cooking with firewood, an extremely small percentage of them are connected to the grid. Not just that, almost 50% of them don't have any access to electricity at all. So these are clearly the target group for remaining electrification efforts. We do a lot on stopgap households. Some of it is here and some of it is in further breakdowns. So primary sources of backup lighting. This is a really interesting one that people don't necessarily pay much attention to. The reality being that a lot of people, when they get connected to the grid because of unreliability of the grid, still end up using lots of other sources of stopgap solutions. And you can see how that differs actually between people that have tier 5 access or people that have say tier 1 access via solar system. The difference between kerosene use and candle use is pretty fascinating. It has greenhouse gas implications, but also expenditure implications for households. Let's move forward and look at, say, some more cooking fuel details. We've made some very cool charts, we think, that are kind of heat maps. And this I think can really help people understand the norms in under different conditions. So for this one you're looking at now is primary cooking fuel type versus primary stove type. And you can see, like, at a national level, the most common combination is still firewood with a 3-stone open fire. If you switch to urban, there's a big shift, and you see a lot more kind of charcoal and LPG use with manufactured stoves. And you can even pick what, based on primary source of electricity, how that changes. Let's zip forward to our module 2, which is a consumption and economics module. So this is a lot of this is about expenditures and about usage. And one of the more interesting ones that I think is really worth pulling up is again looking at people's use of stopgap sources, namely kerosene and candles. And one thing you can see very clearly looking at this chart, for example, we're looking at globally now the use of kerosene candles, but if you flip and say, hey, let's just look at candles. Candles in Kenya are broadly being used as a backup source for people with electricity connections that are typically unreliable. If you switch to hurricane lamps, so a type of kerosene lamp, you can see people are using these on essentially a regular basis as their primary source of lighting. And we can show that, we can show information on monthly expenditures, weekly expenditures, here on lamps, and how that changes depending on essentially your electricity tier level. Obviously, all these other breakdowns that I've mentioned before, which I think are really, really quite powerful, and will help those companies that are better trying to understand potential clients, understand how much they're spending on these stopgap sources. Very often, like I said, with average household size and the impact figures that people are calculating, there's a tendency to use averages when in fact you really need to be able to see the spread, which we're showing to you here, right? Some people may be spending a lot, but a lot of people are spending very little, and the average doesn't actually mean that much when you're targeting clients. We simply have expenditures on cooking related elements, so on fuel for stoves and how that breaks down. So if you're wanting to understand like how much people are spending on LPG versus how much they're spending on say charcoal, a really interesting ongoing question of the affordability of LPG vis-a-vis charcoal and the potential to transition those types of users over. And then things on like willingness to pay for say a full fuel wood cook stove in this case. So we're showing here the people that don't know whether they can afford it or know they can afford it, and the reasons why they wouldn't purchase a stove, and how that changes kind of nationally and based on what kind of electricity access they have too. And then we have a lot of charts here on expenditure. So as Dana mentioned, it's not strictly related to energy, but there are obviously going to be some interesting relationships between these things. So you can see kind of how much people are spending on transportation per month and how that varies between different energy situations. Expenditures on oh, and I like this one here. This is expected monthly expenditure on electricity. So this is specifically for households that don't have access to the KPLC grid currently. Their own view about how much they could be spending or they would spend if they were to get an electricity connection. And just looking right here, I don't know if people know the exchange rate now, but we're talking like the vast majority of people that answered this question think that they would spend on the order of $3 to $5 per month on electricity. And that's a factor that's going to be really interesting and relevant to KPLC when they're doing their own thinking about the economics of grid extension and whether or not there may be other better solutions for providing access to these clients. So really a lot to work with here.
And there's so much, and this is really, as Donna shared with us in her remarks, this is really the visualization of those PDFs and those reports that we've seen in the past. So I encourage people to really go in and play around here. But I want to bring us to some questions that have been coming in the time we have remaining, and being respectful of people's time with this hour. One of the questions is how AIP fits within some of the other good resources and tools that are out there. And there's been comments specifically about the Energy Access Explorer and some of the work that Power Africa has been doing, the VITO geospatial analysis. Could you talk a little bit about the differentiation here, particularly the open source component of it and the aggregation of component of it?
Absolutely. So the goal with the AIP was always to be very kind of more expansive and essentially to bring as much into the mix here as possible. So while you hear energy a lot, the reality is we want this to be applicable to other last mile distributors as well. And we're really making an effort to do that, particularly in the geospatial module where we have a little bit more flexibility in what we're working with. But one other focus was on ease of use here and really just helping people understand what data is available and almost kind of making this a bit of a gateway drug to data analysis. We don't claim that this is the most sophisticated tool and that this will allow you to do sophisticated calculations, for example, like which customer, how many customers are X kilometers from the grid and things like that. There are essentially advanced tools that have been produced by other organizations that are really fantastic for that. But this is a stepping stone essentially to those types of tools and those types of services, some of which are paid. And will be really valuable to the right kinds of customers. We wanted this to be really accessible. We wanted to be somewhere that if you're scratching your head.
I'm sorry, if I could, is that this is like the term that in my mind, being the non-techie person, is this is the gateway. This is what's actually enabling practitioners, other deeper dives that can be done through some of these other systems and platforms that have been discussed in the Q&A chat. Is that how we should be thinking about this?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I hope the tool helps people realize how much is out there and also what's not out there and where we need to be making more efforts to generate valuable data.
How would these tools be used by energy plan? What's the value of this particularly to the government? And again, the differentiation with some of the other tools.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. The reality is those plans are very difficult to execute, and often in large part because you have to make these pretty broad brush assumptions about, for example, energy demand in different areas. And so you'll see with kind of least cost electrification plans, that's one thing that those that conduct those have a really hard time with. And I even have examples recently where we were able to essentially help with those activities by providing anonymized access to the MTF data with the World Bank SMAP's permission to allow those that are doing these exercises to have a clearer idea of what the likely electricity demand needs are going to be in different areas. And I think this platform, what I'd be keen to see is more of those activities take into account more clearly the productive use potential, for example, in different areas, and factor those in quite well into expected demand needs by area. So I think making more data available and even just helping people realize that data is available before they conduct those activities can really change some of the approaches that are taken. So instead of kind of doing a full integrated planning exercise where you just assume that people are going to consume X number of kilowatt hours per month in a certain area, and 2 times as much in an urban area, say, this will give the government and other entities a much clearer picture of the reality on the ground, and be able to hone those activities accordingly.
Great, thank you, Ian, and my apologies. I seem to be having an internet problem here. What I'd like to do at this point, and Ian, thank you so much for just giving us an overview of something that is clearly quite filled with data information and an ability to move and it come alive. So thank you for sharing that introduction with us. What I'd like to do very quickly is go to Engineer Kiva and see if you have any closing comments or thoughts after you've a very brief Twitter-like closing statement, please.
Thank you, Christine. Just listening to the presentation is so great. The value and the potential in this tool is so great. Gives us a lot of confidence that we can have the same level of information across the ministry to make a decision, and that it is also going to be useful to those who are implementing, to those who are designing, and therefore we can only look forward to interacting with this AIP, even as we continue to develop our INEP, as we continue to update our Kenya National Electrification Strategy, and as we formulate COSAP 2, the COSAP 2. Thank you, Christine. I want also to thank all the parties who have made this a success. CDC, we appreciate the support of CDC. Thank you so much, Gio. Thank you, Sema. Thank you, Dana, from World Bank and all World Bank colleagues. And of course, Dan Murphy and your colleague, we thank you so much. That's my comment, and hope to continue getting this becoming better and better. And also, we do know once we also start using it in Kenya, we would like the same to also be utilized in our East African countries, because we share a lot of information, and we are on the same platform as ESC, and later even COMESA as Eastern African Power Pool, working together in the regional bodies. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Engineer Keevan. Again, my apologies. We're having a storm here, so my internet is a little unstable. Jeff, if I could turn to you for some closing comments based on
just very quickly, would encourage people to take advantage of this data, and just remember that, it's the data in itself is not the objective, but it's really, as you said in your introduction, Christine, to make everyone more effective and efficient at addressing the energy access challenge. So I just hope that this will be, one tool amongst others that will help everyone be better about addressing this key challenge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. And Donna, any last thoughts after what? Yep, sorry, Donna, go ahead.
Yes, sorry about that. No, just reiterating what everyone else has said. I think now it's time to basically go to the platform and play with it and see what wealth of information it contains. I'm really looking forward to being able to do that, and recommend everyone else to do the same.
So you can see the closing information on where to go to live. The site will be going live at the conclusion of this webinar. So if we could please put that slide up. We're having So here we go, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We'll do our best to answer the questions that came up in the chat box afterwards, but please do be in contact with us. As started at the beginning, This is for the practitioners and our goal to reaching SDG 7 by 2030. Thank you all very much for joining. We appreciate you sticking through for the full hour. Thank you to the Catalyst team and partners. And I wish everyone a great best of the day or evening, depending on where you are. And please stay well. Take care. Bye-bye.